Hello, guys. Kimi Katiti here. Let me know if the mic is working. So far, everything on my end should be looking good. But today, I wanted to talk a little bit about a movie I just watched and actually watched twice, Glass Onion. And before I get into that, I just really want to thank you guys so much for an amazing 2022. Shout out to my subscribers. I just really appreciate all your support. Thank you so much for engaging in the community posts. Thank you for joining live streams and, of course, watching the videos. A lot of those things are things that I was really just kind of dipping my toes into this year. So I really appreciate the support. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Hope you're going to have an amazing 2023. But yeah, just thank you guys so much. And let's get into talking about Glass Onion. So this live stream, I'm not really going to show a lot of clips of the movie. Of course, not really trailers. It's just going to be a lot of verbal discussion about it. But I'm going to touch on the whole anti-woke critique part in a second. I just first want to talk about the movie itself. Like, aside from the anti-woke stuff, woke stuff, the cultural critique, the movie itself was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed Glass Onion. I'm not a movie review person. I don't usually do this, but I thought I'd share my opinion on it because it was one of the better movies I've seen this year. Um, what movies have I seen? I haven't gone to the movie theater a lot this year, to be honest. Um, and even the stuff that I did see in the theaters was just not as amazing as Glass Onion. This was a really engaging mystery film. If anyone's ever seen Knives Out, by the same directors, it's in the same style, featuring the same detective, Benoit Blanc. And this one is unique because it takes place during the beginning of the pandemic, so May 2020. And for that reason, brings up a lot of relevant characters, archetypes, stereotypes, and I think does a pretty decent job with presenting those archetypes. Okay, so now let's break it down to the characters. And by the way, spoiler alert, major spoiler is coming. If you have not seen the movie and you do plan to watch it, do not watch the rest of this live stream. Maybe catch it later on another day. But for the actual purposes and intents of this live stream, I will be just going into everything. So this is the spoiler alert warning. Also, feel free to let me know your thoughts if you have seen it. I'll be checking out the comments as well. But let's break it down to the characters. So we have this group of friends of what I believe is a billionaire or millionaire, just super rich guy, a tech innovator by the name of Miles Braun. He invites his friends onto a island in Greece, his private island in Greece, for a weekend getaway where they have to solve the mystery of his murder. So from the beginning of the movie, we get into it and we have this suspicion that the person we're going to be investigating is Miles Braun, and he's playing he's playing this game about murder, but then he gets murdered. So that's what I went into it thinking. But in the process of this invitation going out to his friends, we kind of get an introduction to Miles Braun's inner circle. They call themselves the Disruptors, and they're all friends. First person we see is actress Catherine Hahn, I think is her name. She plays a political candidate, and she's opens the door to receive a delivery, which is part of the invitations to go to Greece from Miles Braun. This like mysterious, like enigmatic box that they have to open. Basically, she comes out of the door. Mind you, this is the beginning of the pandemic, and she doesn't have her mask on. So the first thing she does, opens the door, is ready to receive the delivery, and then it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Immediately covers her mouth. We see this happen a couple more times throughout the character of Catherine. Again, she's kind of a left-leaning political candidate. I think she was running. She is a governor, or she's running for governor, or was running for re-elections. Feel free to correct me. But she kind of has this performative aspect to her sort of COVID tiptoeing, where you can see that she doesn't really care so much for COVID policies. But she tries to be performative with the whole masking thing. And masks are used in this movie to, again, illustrate some of the cultural critique and commentary. So, what was Homegirl's name? Totally forgot her name, but I know the actress's name was Catherine. So she's the political character. And later on, we see that she is backed by this billionaire, Miles Braun, and he has some shady stuff that we get into later in the movie. But as they're arriving on this island in Greece, the same lady has her mask slip for a second, but then she's conscious to put it back up. And then the big hypocrisy about her character is that she actually leaves her home, her pod, her bubble, her COVID bubble, goes over to party in Greece, maskless, and that's what she's afraid of her constituents or people who are going to support her campaign. She's afraid of people seeing that, but she doesn't mind doing it anyway because she doesn't really believe in it. So I feel like Catherine's character is a sort of perfect balance to the sort of anti-woke characters that we see. And I'm going to put air quotation marks because we're going to dive into these other characters. Also, there is Lionel, who is sort of this scientist, played by Leslie Odom Jr. And he is a genius, but then again, Miles Braun is pushing him to put out this product called Clear. It's an energy source that ultimately has way more negative side effects for the communities that would use it than positives. But because Miles is this billionaire, he really pressures Lionel into greenlighting it, which again, we'll get into that. So those are more of the left-leaning characters in this group of friends. And then we get into the anti-woke characters. And this is where we see Dave Bautista's character, Duke, his girlfriend, Whiskey, come into the picture, as well as Birdie, that's played by Kate Hudson. Now, I love the way they structured these characters, but first things first, the way the movie portrays them, I think, is a great indicator of the way Hollywood sees the pushback against wokeness. So first of all, when it comes to the introduction of Birdie's character, played by Kate Hudson, she receives this enigmatic box, but just prior to that, her assistant has confiscated her phone. It's like, you cannot touch your phone. And she's like, come on, I'm so bored. I need to do something else. Mind you, she's like got 1,000 people in her house partying. This is the middle of COVID, the beginning of COVID lockdown. They're all maskless. They're just on top of each other. And so she's totally like, she portrays this stereotype of like the complete anti-masker, like COVID denying type person. And then they blend this sort of COVID denial with a propensity to be culturally insensitive. So from the get-go, Kate Hudson's character really wants her phone back, and her assistant, Peg, who is also is in the inner circle of the disruptors, pretty much says you can't use it because the last time you were on Twitter, you tweeted out an ethnic slur. And she's like, well, turns out the ethnic slur was anti-Semitic. And that's the introduction to this Kate Hudson character, is that she really doesn't care about cultural sensitivity. And then immediately after sort of saying, well, it doesn't matter that I used an anti-Semitic slur, starts complaining about, oh, we are so woke. She complains about wokeness. And some guy, I'm sure it was a cameo by someone famous, kind of agrees with her, but he's this older white man sitting across from her in her house as she's having this gigantic party during the day. And that's, I think, where they really started to poke at some of the woke pushback, but the problem was they set it up with something that truly does not define the pushback against wokeness. Wokeness is not trying to be as, derogatory as possible, but this theme with Kate Hudson's character comes up a few more times. And that's kind of what I want to get into. So I'm going to kind of focus on Birdie's character. We'll jump into Dave for a bit, but I think Birdie's character is really important to address because there are some things that Benoit Blanc says that I think we can get some positives from, Benoit Blanc is a detective played by Daniel Craig. I think we can get some positives from that, some lessons that we can learn, but we can also get some, I guess, some negatives. We can deduct some of the stuff that absolutely was kind of a false writing on woke pushback. So Birdie, more so, I would say she embodies the sort of reckless person who her whole thing is that she just says what she thinks without any filters, and she hates the fact that she always gets in trouble for saying what she thinks. And that's what I think Hollywood is trying to now present, sort of this woke pushback crowd as just being people who want to say what they want to say without any filters. So not only that, we also see that down the line, Kate Hudson's character, Birdie, was, I guess, canceled because she went to a Halloween costume party trying to pay tribute to Beyonce. And I guess what they're trying to say about that is that she basically was in some sort of blackface or was making fun of African Americans or Beyonce. They didn't really get into the details of that. But again, she moans and complains like everyone's so sensitive these days. And then there's something in the beginning as we're getting introduced to these characters, and as Benoit Blanc, who kind of plays us as the audience, he says something to Birdie that I found to be very interesting. And I think even though they set up Birdie's character to be quite annoying and not really representative of, true anti-woke pushback, and again, I'm going to get into like kind of the negatives of the whole anti-woke movement because there are a lot. But Benoit Blanc says this. He says, ooh, it's a dangerous thing to mistake speaking without thought for speaking the truth. He says it's a dangerous thing to mistake speaking without thought for speaking the truth. And I found that to be interesting because I don't think most people who are pushing back against wokeness are necessarily just speaking without thought. I think there is this undertone that you can see sort of in a blanket undertone of saying what everyone is thinking, which is something they bring up in the movie. But I think it's important to be discerning, especially as people who push back against wokeness, where just speaking without thought just is not the same as speaking the truth. So I do think there's something in that line that Daniel Craig delivers. There is a grain of truth to it. And a big thing that I saw, especially with the whole Kanye West devolving into anti-Semitism, was people who just kind of rode his train without any thought and equated the fact that he was thinking freely, quote unquote, with equated thinking freely or just thinking without thought for speaking the truth. I think it's important, and especially as we go into the new year, that in the sort of pushback against wokeness, and it is a mind virus, and it is something to continue to dissect, talk about, discuss, where things are falling apart, where things are disintegrating, where it's leading to more depression, more anxiety, it's leading to a sense of lack of purpose in our youth. We do need to talk about that, where it's leading to the destruction of identity. We do need to talk about that. But we really need to be discerning about where we are just following people who are thirsty for attention and are willing to say anything that is insensitive simply because there is such a dramatic weight of sensitivity in culture today, if that makes sense. Some of the people that, again, I know I've made videos about Kanye West, but I think there are a lot other people, like, I'm not the biggest Andrew Tate fan, and I think a lot of proponents of the Red Pill movement kind of encapsulate this whole just say whatever is aggressive in order to attain attention, and not necessarily for the purpose of seeking the truth or helping people. So that's just my personal opinion. So I just want to tangent into Dave Bautista's character, the character of Duke. Duke sort of plays into this whole macho, like masculine guy who's all about preserving masculinity. The first shot we see of him is making a stream sort of clarifying his statements on the breastification of America, which is to say, sort of the what would you call it, like the feminism of America, or the, what is that word, emasculation, I'm not sure, but he's basically saying, like, men are getting weaker in society, and I guess this is just kind of poking at the Jordan Peterson types. Again, I'm not in the mind of Ryan Johnson. I don't know what he was going through, what he was writing about, but you can tell he's kind of poking fun at some of the red pillars. But I think the bigger point there was that Duke, Dave Bautista's character, was more in love with the idea of his name, his channel growing, his live stream platform growing, than actually helping men, because later on in the movie we see that he does something just very emasculating, in that he allowed his girlfriend to spend the night with Miles Braun, the millionaire, just so that he can find a way to leverage his platform and get onto Alpha News. And so I think it's important to really take away from that, even though, again, like, they're not really portraying these characters in a healthy way. It's important to see the bigger picture, which is the criticism of an attachment to money and wrong motives. So I'm just going to take a brief pause. I just want to read the comments really quickly. So Abigail says, that's interesting because a lot of Hollywood folks probably only interact with non-woke people on Twitter. I've seen people who say that the most offensive things they can just to push a boundary. I don't know if that's necessarily without thought, but it's a simple desire. So yeah. So ultimately, while this thing does actually poke at people on the left, like we see with Catherine's character, and people who are more right-wing, anti-maskers, anti-COVID, the big critique here, just as Abigail said, is actually the grifting. I think that was the big takeaway. And I think it's an important note for anyone who finds himself making some sort of drive content off of anti-wokeness. So for example, I'll use myself as an example. So I made the video, this is how I escaped the cult of wokeness, in 2021. It's almost 2023, so I have to be conscious that this was like a while back. In 2021, last year, and I have sensed the sort of attachment, not only in myself, but attachment and fixation on focusing on the extremes of the other side, and then sort of getting lost in wanting to help people get out of that, and focusing on the metrics you get for poking fun at other people on the other side. So that's a big reason why I don't really make a lot of woke reaction videos, because I don't really see the direct benefit that has for people who are suffering from the mind virus of wokeness. And I do have a lot of, I will reserve my opinions, but I do have a sort of eyebrow raised towards content creators who thrive on the extremities of wokeness, because at the end of the day, there is a dollar sign attached to the word woke. Like, if you search in Google Trends, like, words that are highly, sought after, woke is a big word. And I can't imagine, or rather I can imagine, that people do sort of grift off of pushing back on wokeness simply because it kind of pinches at people's fear and concern over what's going on. But then it goes past that threshold of caring about people, having a concern for what's going on, crosses the threshold and goes into me, what can I get, how can I build my platform. So I think this movie really gets into that, both for people on the left and people on the right. Again, it's a very complicated movie, so if you haven't seen it, highly recommend you check it out. One of the best movies I've seen this year. So anyway, Dave Bautista is so obsessed with his platform growing. His girlfriend kind of fed up with him. Dave Bautista, Duke, uses his girlfriend to basically spend the night with this other guy, with Miles Braun, the billionaire. And in a way is a hypocrite of his own message. And Whiskey herself, his girlfriend, is kind of fed up, but she's like, look, he's putting me on his channel more often, and I'm thinking of getting into politics. I think this is kind of what she says word for word. I'm thinking of getting into politics later on, and I kind of need his right-leaning audience. That's what I understood from it. So even Whiskey, she's kind of like, the blonde that's more attractive, but kind of isn't as intellectually engaged as the other disruptors. But she has her thing and she's hanging on, but she's just willing to put up with a lie in order to grow her platform. And I think that's the big disease that they're poking at again in this movie, is just how deceitful riches can be. I actually really wanted to start off this live stream with a scripture. Um, the beginning of Proverbs 23, verse 1. It talks about being careful when you're sitting down with rich rulers. And I kind of wanted to set the tone with the scripture, kind of like my mind keeps going back to this. So Proverbs 23, verse 1, it says, when you sit down to dine with a ruler, consider carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you have a big appetite. And I think that's what the movie really gets at. So when it comes to the anti-woke movement, which is kind of what this live stream is about, I do think they missed the mark. Again, it is Hollywood, but I think they did really try to give a fair comparison. We have the hypocrite on the left, which is Catherine, the political candidate, but then we also kind of have the hypocrites on the right, Dave Bautista, Birdie, and so ultimately they're willing to lie for a lie. They're willing to lie in order to build their own brand, in order to build their empires. But they're totally fine with presenting this version of themselves that is kind of a lie, that is immune to criticism, and it gets them in extremely hot water, and you just see them become these weak cowards at the very end of the movie. I personally have a heart for making sure people know when the people that they pay attention to on YouTube, and I'm not immune from this, notice and catch people when they're going into, I'm willing to lie, I'm willing to present a lie, I'm willing to present more things that I don't believe in because I need to build my brand. I noticed that becoming a disease as we're shifting out of 2020, 2021, and even on the whole anti-woke pushback, I see a lot of characters who I wonder if there weren't extremes on the other side, like what kind of content would they make? Like what kind of content, if I didn't kind of take a step back and reconsider what kind of content I wanted to create, what would I be doing if everything was solved? So that's why I have been more Christian in my approach, more direction towards Jesus, because the big puppet master here is unfortunately money. And the Bible also says that the love of money is the root of all evil. So be careful. It's not about a left and a right thing. Ultimately, it is a spiritual battle that we're facing right now, and that we're seeing play out in culture today. Also, just one more scripture as I wrap this up. And again, if you're old enough, you're mature enough, highly recommend watching the movie. I'm not paid by Netflix or Ryan Johnson or anything like that. But I just want to read Ephesians 6 verse 12. So Ephesians 6 verse 12. It says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this darkness, against evil spiritual forces in the heavens." When we see, as we're pushing back wokeness, when we see, people exhibit things in the physical, those people are not the enemy. I think this is very important anytime you're talking about this topic. Again, I know I have different people of different beliefs subscribe to this channel, but always remember, like, they can be changed too. Like, we're all ultimately on a journey of sanctification, especially if you're a believer. We're on a journey of sanctification. We can't keep constantly poking fun at people on the side, because soon enough we're going to cross a threshold where we're not really presenting thoughts that we believe in simply because we're chasing after money. So yeah, remember that it really is a spiritual battle, and the people in front of us really aren't our enemies. Continue to use discernment. Again, that Benoit Blanc quote, don't conflate speaking without thought for speaking the truth, I think has some real gem value to it. But yeah, always be conscious of what you're doing, your motives for life, what you're working towards. Is it to make people better, or is it to build your own empire? And are you willing to lie in order to do that, or to put up a facade? Anyway, I love you guys. I am here with my hot chocolate this AM. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Hope you guys are setting up to have a wonderful New Year's celebration as we ring in 2023. I am so glad that we're not in COVID lockdown anymore. I know this was like a while ago, but just seeing that movie reminded me like, yo, we really made it out of that. Like people were going at each other's throats because they were unvaccinated or because they were vaccinated. Like we got to be grateful that we're out of that. Grateful that we're able to start seeing each other as humans again. Grateful that even Hollywood can kind of poke fun at like certain political candidates and not be so, cautious about it, basically. And yeah, we made it out of that. So there's a lot to be grateful for. I love you guys. Have a happy new year. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Have a great one, y'all. And see you later. Bye bye.